The Wizard of Oz. Chapter 1 The Cyclone. Dorothy was a little girl who lived with her Aunt Em and Uncle Henry on a farm on the wide open prairie in Kansas. Their home was a tiny, one-room house just big enough for 2 beds, a rusty old stove, a kitchen table, and a few chairs. In the middle of the floor was a trapdoor, and under that was the cellar, a safe place to hide if a cyclone came along. It was a hole dug into the ground, just big enough for the family to squeeze into. The house sat in the midst of the great prairie. Not a tree or house broke the broad sweep of flat land that reached to the edge of the sky in every direction. The sun had baked the plowed land into a gray mass, with little cracks running through it. Even the grass was gray instead of green, for the sun had burned the long blades until they were the same color as the rest of the land. Dorothy was often lonely. Her Aunt Em and Uncle Henry loved her very much, but they didn't laugh or play because they worked so hard on the farm. Her only playmate was her dog, Toto. He was small and black, with long, silky hair, the only thing that wasn't gray from prairie dust. Toto made Dorothy laugh, and she loved him more than anything else in the whole world. One hot summer day, Dorothy was standing on the front porch with Uncle Henry. She watched him look anxiously at the sky, which was even grayer and gloomier than usual. From the far north, they could hear a low wail of the wind, and could see the long, gray grass bowing like waves before an approaching storm. Then, from the south, came a sharp whistling in the air. They looked that way, and saw even wilder ripples in the grass. Suddenly, Uncle Henry stood up. "There's a cyclone coming, Em," he yelled to his wife, who was in the house. "Get down in the cellar, and take Dorothy and Toto. I'll look after the cows." He ran into the wind, which was now strong enough to snatch his hat off of his head and send it flying into the sky. Aunt Em ran to a window. One glance told her that danger was coming very swiftly. Frantically, she opened the trapdoor to the cellar. "Quick, Dorothy," she called as she climbed down into the hole, "get down in the cellar." Dorothy was frightened and did as she was told. Just as she got to the trapdoor, though, Toto jumped out of her arms and ran to hide beneath her bed. "Toto, come back," she called, running after the dog. She got down on her hands and knees and reached for him. She had just gotten a hold of him and started to stand up when there came a great shriek from the wind. The house shook so hard that she lost her footing and was thrown to the floor. Then a strange thing happened. The house shook and shook until it was lifted from its foundation. It whirled around 2 or 3 times and rose slowly through the air. Dorothy felt as if she were going up in a hot air balloon. Fortunately, the house was in the exact center of the cyclone, where the air is very calm. Nothing flew into the house, but the winds around it were so strong that they made the house climb higher and higher into the gray, stormy sky. It was very dark and the wind howled horribly, but Dorothy found that she was riding it out quite easily. Toto, however, was frightened. He ran around barking loudly and almost fell through the open trapdoor, so Dorothy crawled over and slammed it shut. Hour after hour passed by and, slowly, Dorothy got over her fright. She crawled across the swaying floor to her bed and lay down upon it. Toto jumper up to lie beside her. Despite the swaying of the house and the wailing of the wind, Dorothy closed her eyes and fell fast asleep. Chapter 2 The Munchkins. The house crashed to the ground with a sudden thump, waking Dorothy and Toto and tossing them off the bed. Confused, Dorothy stood up and rubbed her eyes. The house seemed to be in good shape, and the storm was over. Sunshine streamed through the windows and flooded the room. Dorothy ran to the door and threw it up open. She gave a cry of amazement at what she saw. The cyclone had set the house down in a beautiful countryside. Dorothy stared at the array of colors around her. She had never seen anything like this place in her entire life. There were lawns of bright green grass and tree bursting with colorful fruit. Gorgeous flowers were everywhere, and birds sang and fluttered in the trees and bushes. Nearby, a small brook was running between green banks. Everything seemed very peaceful, and very different from Kansas. As Dorothy gazed in wonder at her new surroundings, she noticed a group of people walking toward her. They were the oddest-looking bunch she had ever seen. They were not as big as the grown-ups she was used to, but they were not very small, either. In fact, they were about as tall as Dorothy, although, so far as looks go, they were many years older. The 3 men and 1 woman were oddly dressed. They wore cone-shaped hats that rose a foot above their heads, with little bells around the brim that tinkled sweetly as they moved. The men's hats were blue, the woman's was white. The men, Dorothy thought, were about as old as Uncle Henry, for 2 of them had beards. Her face was covered with wrinkles, her hair was nearly white, and she walked rather stiffly. The little people drew near the house where Dorothy was standing, then paused and whispered among themselves. They seemed afraid to go any closer. Then the little old woman walked up to Dorothy, made a low bow and said, in a sweet voice, "Welcome to the land of the Munchkins, most noble sorceress. We want to thank for killing the wicked witch of the East and setting our people free from her evil control." Dorothy listened to this speech with wonder. What could this little woman possibly mean? "You must be mistaken," Dorothy protested. "I am just a girl from Kansas who is lost. My house blew away during a cyclone. I have not killed anything." "Well, your house certainly did," said the woman, laughing. "See, there are her feet, still sticking out from under it." She pointed to the corner of the house. Dorothy looked, and gave a little cry of fright. There, indeed, just under a corner of the great beam the house rested on, were 2 feet, wearing silver shoes with pointed toes. "Oh, dear!" Dorothy exclaimed. "I never meant to hurt anyone." "Who was she?" "The Wicked Witch of the East, as I said," the little woman replied. "She has held all the Munchkins in bondage for many years, making them slave for her night and day. Now they are free, and they are grateful to you for the favor." "Are you a Munchkin?" asked Dorothy. "Munchkins are the people who live here, in the east of Oz. I am the Good Witch of the North." "Are you a real witch?" asked Dorothy, suddenly frightened. "I thought all witches were evil." "Oh, I am certainly a real witch, but not all witches are evil. There are 4 witches in the land of Oz. 2, in the north and the south are good witches, and people love us. The other 2 in the east and the west are evil witches who are feared and hated. But now, that is all that is left of the Wicked Witch of the East," she said, pointing once again to the feet under the house. Just as she did this, the feet shriveled up and disappeared, leaving the sparkling, silver shoes behind. "She was so old and evil," said the Good Witch, laughing, "that she just dried up in the sun. The silver slippers are yours now. There is a charm connected with them, but what it does, we do not know. Thank you very much for all of your kindness, Dorothy replied as she took the silver shoes. But can you help me find my way back to Kansas? The Munchkins and the Good Witch had never heard of Kansas, nor did they know how to get there. They explained that Oz was surrounded by a huge desert that no one had ever crossed. Dorothy began to sob at this, for she felt lonely among all these strange people. Her tears saddened the kind-hearted Munchkins, and they immediately took out their handkerchiefs and began to weep with her as for the Good Witch. She took off her cap and balanced the point on the end of her nose, while she counted to 3. At once, the cap changed to a slate, on which was written in big, white chalk marks, "Let Dorothy go to the City of Emeralds." "There is your answer, my child," she said. "The City of Emeralds is home to Oz, a great and powerful wizard. The road to the city is paved with yellow bricks, so you cannot miss it. When you get to Oz, do not be afraid of him, but tell your story and ask him to help you." At this, the Good Witch gave Dorothy a kiss on her forehead, which left a mark that the witch said would protect her from harm. Then the Good Witch disappeared and the Munchkins went away, leaving Dorothy and Toto all alone. Dorothy sat down on the front porch of her house to think. She decided that she would go to Oz, otherwise, she might never see Aunt Em or Uncle Henry again. So she packed a little basket with food from her house. She washed her face, changed into a clean, blue and white checked dress, and put on her new silver shoes. There were several roads nearby, but it did not take her long to find the one paved with yellow bricks. Within a short time, she was walking briskly toward the Emerald City, her silver shoes tinkling merrily along the road.